Hey everyone, welcome back to Talking SaaSy, the show that brings you inside the minds of top SaaS operators with real world stories and strategies and tactics to help you scale smarter. I'm your host, Kareen Say, and we are live brought to you by Interact, your data science backed growth partner for founder led SaaS companies. Now, if this is your first time joining us, welcome. You're in for a treat today as we have a pretty special show lined up. We are in episode 3 today, and we'll be diving into a topic that's a bit of a double-edged sword for a lot of founders: data-driven decision making. And more specifically, we'll be tackling what happens when your data leads you astray. Yep, it happens more often than you might think. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by someone who knows the ins and outs of this, Camela Thompson. Camela is a fractional marketing advisor with over 15 years of experience in revenue ops in highly successful tech startups. She's the former VP of marketing at CaliberMind, and today she runs her own consultancy, working closely with companies and founders in balancing their data-driven strategies with, let's just say, a much needed dose of empathy and leadership. So today's episode is called Data-Driven Delusions, when analytics lead you astray. Together, we'll unpack the hidden pitfalls of data in this ever-shifting B2B landscape. With the rise of social, community, brand marketing, what does all this mean for you when it comes to metrics that matter? What are data points that could steer you down the wrong path? So we'll cover a lot of practical tips for all you lean teams out there, how to set up effective reporting without falling into that dreaded analysis paralysis, for example. So whether you're a founder or a growth team of one, you walk away from this episode with lots of insights you can use to navigate this very complex world of data in 2024 and beyond. So let's get started. Let me bring Camela onto the studio with me.
Hi.
Hi, Camela. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you doing today?
Pretty well. Thanks so much for having me. If you hear any snoring in the background, that's my elderly dog. It's fine. It's not me.
I'm sure. No, that said, I have to give you massive credit because I know it's super early for you, and I'm just so thrilled that you're able to join us.
It's a topic that I very near and dear to my heart. There's some trauma there, but that's good. We all have scars. It's fine. We have baggage.
Yep. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty, and I'm sure we'll be learning a lot from you, I'd love to hear your story. How did you end up on this SaaSy journey?
Well, it's funny, like a lot of people in revenue operations on accident. So I actually started off as a financial analyst and then had an opportunity with a company to go into sales operations and had an aptitude for systems and was a CRM admin back in like 2007. So Salesforce was just in its very beginning. Since then, I've moved to CS ops, marketing ops, back to sales ops. And then I decided to make a major career change and go into content marketing, specializing in SaaS companies, B2B SaaS companies who are selling to people like I used to be, because there were a lot of things that frustrated me about the buying process that I was like naively thought I could just immediately fix. But it turns out marketing is really difficult, and being in marketing, you get a lot more respect for, just being in a function. Like I've done some sales engineering, I've done some customer success onboarding, and that empathy comes in and you start to understand, oh, that's why people are asking those questions. I understand what they're trying to defend to leadership. Yes. It's just really, really helpful.
I'm really excited because, data can be such a hard topic, right? Very black and white, but it's not a standalone piece of insight into your entire customer engagement, the quality of your, your customers, your pipeline, so many things. So I'm certainly very eager to dive into it with you, especially given your rich background, a little bit of everything in the past so many years. So yeah. So my first question for you, as you might be aware, there's been so many shifts in the B2B landscape. from, hey, let's just all do paid ads to, well, there's brand marketing, there's community, there's this, there's that. Curious to get your thoughts, with all these shifts, what are some of the first things that founders can do to align the sales and marketing efforts to maximize the growth, the outcomes, the outputs?
I think that's a fantastic question. And like so many things, and what if I could just shake a founder and tell them something? There are no silver bullets or one right way to do things. So it's really critical that they foster collaboration between the teams and not fall into the trap of believing that stirring up competition between marketing sales will create a healthy tension. It's never going to be healthy. So you want to give them the same goals and really encourage and coach your marketing leaders, because for a lot of early stage startups, they tend to hire folks that are kind of green. Really coach them to pay more attention to bookings and pipeline. They should be just as aware of where we're at on meeting company goals as the sales team, because that will shift their mentality a bit, like stay away from the MQL trap and really keep them focused on pipeline generation and booking generation, and the mindset that if sales is not meeting their goals, marketing is not meeting their goals. So on the other side of that, though, you really need to encourage sales to collaborate and be a good recipient or a good partner in all of this. And my best sales management VP of marketing roles, the people who collaborated the best were those who saw that I shared the same goals as them and really wanted to succeed and was very receptive to any feedback, because I know they're talking to people all the time. So not discounting what they're saying. And I think I see a lot of marketing leaders falling into the trap of sales asks for so much and they're a bunch of complainers. They have a really hard job, and they are the ones who are talking to the most stakeholders. So should probably listen.
I'm curious to get your thought. I certainly appreciate the fact that we are all working towards that one same goal. At the same time, how do we think about roles and responsibilities? How do we, so when sales comes to marketing for support, what would that look like? So instead of marketing saying, well, there's a bunch of complainers, or how do we address that and show that we're actually collaborative partners to each other?
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of shifts in the market that have made what was always important and critical even more vital to succeeding as a business. And one of those things that sales are always asked for is an ROI calculator, testimonials, customer evidence. And we're seeing in the market that, buyers are leaning more on their peer opinions. So communities, especially in an analytic technical role, they spend a lot of time speaking with one another to see what works, because they're kind of risk averse. So it's super critical to listen to sales when they say they're having a problem selling the value. It may not just be an enablement problem. It might be a messaging and are we giving them the right tools, like an ROI calculator, which can be really difficult to figure out, especially when you're trying to find product market fit. But these are the things, when I talk to founders, I always advise them focus on customer evidence. It's one of the richest things, because if you don't focus on the customer experience and delighting your customers, your brand reputation no matter what marketing is doing, could be affected.
I love that. I'm gonna bring it to the role of data, which is the topic of this discussion, because I also think that there is the collaboration between customer evidence, whatever that data looks like, and quantitative data, which is where a lot of people's head is at, right? So while data is critical, to your point, many founders should and do rely on customer insights. Now, how can teams strike that balance between qualitative feedback and data-driven decision-making to refine their go-to-market strategies?
Great question. So I'm going to come at it from two angles. I'm going to come at it from the data-driven analyst who's very logical. This could be your CFO. It could be the CEO. These folks, I'm going to generalize a lot, but they may fall into another role and have a sales background and a different focus. But if they're very focused on the numbers, it's really critical to remember that not all data is created equal. And those same people should be very focused early on in investing in resources that understand how to structure the data in the systems they're using today to be able to scale, even if they move to another system, because you need a good running track record of data to look back to figure out benchmarks, and it has to be structured correctly. And the main number one thing I see structured incorrectly is campaign data, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But it's really important to remember that data is only half the story and there's context. So when I coach revenue operations professionals, I always tell them that, yes, it's really important to run accurate reports and double check. Everything's going to be a little fuzzy and nothing's 100% because even I know a lot of people say sales managers are data driven. Well, they're dealing with forecasts which deal with trying to predict human behavior in the buying cycle, and it's really difficult. So we need to take everything kind of with a grain of salt and bring in that qualitative data. At the same time, I can't tell you how many companies I've consulted for that know their ICP, and very much in air quotes, because when you go into the data and what they're lead scoring on, a lot of the data points they're optimizing for don't even exist consistently in the system. So they're depreciating the value of leads that could really, So what I really recommend is that people look at the data that's available and verify the assumptions that are being made, because sure, they may absolutely know who's more likely to buy, but there's also recency bias, there's human bias. And then a lot of founders like to chase those big deals that may not be the bread and butter of your business. And it's just so critical to verify everything with that information and see if that information even exists in the first place.
Yeah. I love that you brought up lead scoring. I think that was something pretty important there. Give me some examples of what bad lead scoring that doesn't serve you. What would that look like?
Okay, this is to be kind of controversial, but I am not a big fan of lead scoring, particularly when it comes to a point system for engagement. I feel that passing a lead over to sales should be based on a very logical activity that would lead to a conversation with sales. You need to start there. I absolutely believe in layering ICP data. Of course, if it's a janitor at a sports facility and you sell to B2B tech companies, that's not going to be a good fit. Of course, weed those people out. But I think it's super, super critical for marketing and sales to sit at the same table and discuss what a lead should look like and what activities would necessitate that next call, because chances are in early stage startups, you're sending everything to the sales team because they're kind of starving. So content downloads, any kind of interaction, I get it. It makes sense at the time, but eventually things will change. They'll become overwhelmed and they're naturally going to gravitate towards the things that convert better. So it's important to listen to them and start layering in logic based on the level of intent the person's displaying, and to structure your campaign data around how sales thinks about things, because we're using that to communicate what they're following up on. So if we're creating sub campaigns that's at LinkedIn ad 1, 2, 3, that makes zero sense to the sales team. You want to keep it at the asset level and then push that UTM data down to the campaign member. So the salesperson cares more about, well, what kind of content did they download? What kind of product are they interested in? Is it a demo request, and for which product? Keep campaign data at that level and think of the CRM. It's very different than the marketing automation platform, but think of the CRM as, how are we communicating to sales? And how does the rest of the business view these transactions. And I understand that marketers have to defend advertising tooth and nail these days. I get it, but you can have your cake and eat it too by pushing that data down to the campaign member object and still retaining those reports.
Got it. Wow. Yeah, campaign setup is something that really trips a lot of people up. Me as well.
Job security for me, though.
I feel like that could be a topic in and of itself. Because, I personally am a big advocate for campaign level reporting. Moving away from lead source, use campaign source. But I can't say that I have a huge. I'm kind of like alone in that corner fighting that fight.
I agree with you, and would caution marketers to think about in their CRM focusing on campaign interactions that are meaningful to the sales team.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of data we need as marketers that's super critical to figure out whether or not our website is optimized for conversions at different points in the funnel. There's so much data that we need to have, and that's critical for us to do our jobs well. We need to think of the CRM as what does sales need to do their job well, and those are going to be much higher intent signals than a page visit. If you crowd the data, and I see this all the time with attribution, with email clicks, opens, and website, you're diluting the impact of those lower, sorry, I bumped my microphone. You're diluting the impact of those lower funnel things that are so critical and key to converting into pipeline. So think of,
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Just think of campaigns as something that sales can act on, not everything you've done. That's your marketing automation system.
This is a great jumping off point for my next question, actually. So to your point, for a lot of lean teams, there's always too much data, but is it all good data? And when you don't have enough bandwidth to analyze it all, right? There's this risk of, setting up data improperly, right? You want to set it up in a way that's going to yield actionable insights. So how would we identify what those actionable data points are? To your point, how do we know what is intent data as opposed to noise?
I think there's a lot of logic we can apply as marketers because we are trained to think of things as bottom, mid, and top of funnel. So top of funnel activities, that's going to be really useful for us, but not as useful for the sales team. So it depends on what we're doing where. So if we have a website, we should absolutely be looking at website data as a marketer. This founder should not care about that data. They should only care. They should absolutely invest in it early. They should care how effective it is, but hopefully they have a marketer they can trust who's managing that and staying on top of those numbers, because what the founder cares about are new customer acquisition and then expansion of existing customer base. So and marketers need to switch their mindset to meet the CEO and CFO where they are. There kind of has to be a give and take, right? Like the CEO, CFO who believes that because this is technology, we can see everything and we should be looking at everything. No. There's a lot of things that you don't need to know. And then on the marketing side, we need to realize that focusing on initiatives and reporting up things that are happening immediately during board meetings is a huge mistake. We need to talk to those things, but we should be focused on the same metrics quarter over quarter. And that should start with bookings, then pipeline, then lead volume. And we should be talking about lead conversion rates because those are really important. And that's what the business cares about. There's other stuff we have to care about, but that's really, when I've been in boardrooms, that's where people lean forward and start really listening.
Yeah. So it sounds like there are two types of reporting. It sounds like there's this macro level reporting that you would take to the boardroom, right? Reports that track your pipeline, your customer data, And there's this lower level reporting on the website, but that's probably more for teams to know
Exactly.
day-to-day efforts. It sounds
Audience
like.
is everything. So your
Yeah.
individual contributor should be in their system and should be really familiar with the data. And if they're not a data person, pair them with somebody who is. Management level, you're going to want to know top level return on a lot of these things. And then executive level, they're really just concerned about revenue and profit margin. So are you spending effectively and are you generating enough business?
So in this context, maybe walk us through what campaign reporting could look like, how that would surface.
It's a great question. So I do like attribution, but I rarely see it executed well and adopted. Most of the time, I see companies spend 18 months working really hard to produce something that nobody uses. And that's because, in my opinion, too often we're looking at this as a marketing only product that marketing will use. But what the CMO or VP of marketing wants to use it for is board reporting, because the VP of marketing is always under pressure to prove that they are pulling their weight compared to sales and customer success. So I totally get why this happens. What's super critical is if you are going to use it in the boardroom, you have to include, especially sales leadership, in the process of deciding what are the critical touch points that we should be tracking. Because, and should we include sales data in this? Because if we're trying to show departmental attribution, we need to figure out how to track partner contributions and what sales is doing themselves. So if we're not also paying attention to their activity and it looks like marketing sourced 95% of all deals and gets 100% of the credit, and credit is the killer word here that I see teams just spin out over, you're setting yourself up for failure. So if you're looking at pipeline and revenue data, ideally there's a multi-touch attribution model. Ideally, it's really easy to explain. I prefer even weighted just because it's easy to explain. And you're talking to the different team members about which activities are worthy of showing up on that report. So demo requests, form fills, really meaningful activities, and then pair that with sales meeting data and partner lead submissions and all of that good stuff. So it's really important to think of it that way. And then companies that are earlier stage that can't really invest in that kind of analytical structure, I think first or last touch is fine. HubSpot has some multi-touch attribution, but it's going to be very marketing skewed. And it's just super important to keep in mind. It is what it is. And nothing is going to be accurate. Attribution will never be perfect. The dark funnel is real, my friends. It's real. So everything with a grain of salt. And always keep in mind, there will be some activities that marketing has to do that will never show up on an attribution report, and that's okay.
So some best practices around presenting your reporting, have some caveats, disclaimers, set expectations on how to read that report.
Yes. Yeah. And invest some time in working with whoever on your team is really data savvy to understand the shortcomings and what it can and can't do. I see a lot of early stage founders who are so swamped, don't take the time to sit down with their operations person to explain to them what they need and why they need it. Because once I got into a boardroom and was representing marketing, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I knew this is why all these questions were being asked, I would have approached it completely differently.
Wow. Yeah. Would you have some high level of what some of those questions might be to help teams prepare?
Yeah. So I think it's really important to see what motivates each of the teams. And accept that there's a natural dynamic kind of pitting sales and marketing against each other. And when we're having a bad quarter, and a lot of us are in this market, the natural inclination is to point towards something else outside of our control. So I really coach executives to stay very focused on what they can control. I wish as a company and founder, we could be more open to hearing feedback about product and other things and taking that seriously, maybe not in the boardroom, but really having an honest discussion about this huge launch we did. It's just not landing. Can we do some customer research to figure out why? Can we stop treating that as taboo for a marketer to say?
Right.
So the big questions are going to be like the ones you have to answer. How did we do? And as marketers, we have to be very thoughtful to bring up and acknowledge if we miss the number. We can't dance around it. We can't sugarcoat anything. That looks bad. Even though, we do it with our product all the time. It's kind of what we're trained to do. But we have to be honest and say, yep, we missed this. Here's what we did right. Here's what we did wrong. And here's what we're doing differently to make sure that the outcome next quarter is better.
Right.
And if you can spot a problem early in the quarter because you're paying attention to pipeline generation, you can see we're behind because early stage or green sales managers don't tend to pay as much attention to quarters out as they do closing now. So marketers can play a pivotal role in watching for signals that we're going to be behind in future quarters and making up for that by doing things that are pipeline generating. Like, I don't know, maybe you're going to do a dinner or maybe you're going to do a webinar, something that will get lower funnel engagement.
Help you get ahead of pacing, so to speak.
Such a better story to the board than, whoops, we totally missed our pipeline number.
Which actually brings up a great point about the role of reporting, right? It's not really, yes, it does demonstrate what has been done before, but more importantly, it also gives you more of a future look, a look into what future state could look like, how to get ahead of that, right? Which is actually my next question here, assessing the health of your pipeline and even your customer data. I love to hear from you as well, like how common is it for companies to collect customer data, and what can we do to do more of this? Because to your earlier point, I do believe in learning from our customers and using that to do better sales and marketing, but I'm not sure if that's a common habit, right? So when assessing the health of your pipeline, when assessing the health of your customers, to get this clear picture of where to focus your growth, like what are some of the things that we should be bearing in mind? How do we actually make sure that we set up that data right to give us, again, a predictive look into the future?
I always view data as this really rich jumping off point. It's the start of your journey. You're looking for patterns and anomalies and then trying to figure out, okay, why is this happening? So something as simple as a low conversion rate between lead and opportunity, there can be 5, 6, 7 different reasons why this is happening. And we have to research all of them. So are our teams aligned on what the lead definition is? Has it changed over time? The market's changed. Do we need to change? There are so many different things that could be going on. It's not just we don't have enough leads or our leads suck. It's the marketing sales debate that always happens. So look at this as a starting point, a really good source, a rich source of where we should start looking. Also look at data as something we should use to validate assumptions we're making. Because as humans, we're always taking the shortcut and we're drawing from our experience and we're using that information to make a lot of assumptions we may not even be aware of. So the founder may say, hey, I know that we get the most money from these big companies. Step back and look at So step back, look at LTV to cost of goods sold, not just cost of selling or CAC. What you want to do is look at the costs that's going into supporting these customers and the drain on your product development team that may be happening.
Right.
So while you may be getting a lot of money from them, you may be spending more without even realizing it on developing features that no other customer will use.
Right.
So it's super critical to balance things. It's an art and a science. It really is.
Yeah. So it also boils down to whether the customer is a profitable customer for you then.
Exactly. You may find they're actually in your unacceptable customer profile because they're not profitable.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that happen too many times.
Yeah. As they say, customers are not always right either. Sometimes there is a bad customer fit. Costs you too much to support him.
Yeah. And maybe your product just isn't ready for that wide of a demand, and you need to stay in more of a niche use case. That's okay. As long as you're developing features that a wide pool of customers are demanding and not just focusing on the one that may have a wild hair. I see that a lot with analytics products in particular.
Yeah. So it sounds like reporting then would have this financial component attached to it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what would that like? Is that a collaboration with the finance team on and calculating what that total cost is?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So ideally, you have a revenue operations person who's plugged in with them and can get access to that data. At a minimum, if you're at a tiny company, I worked really closely with the CFO and would get anonymized data to calculate customer acquisition costs, because salary data is going to go into that. They're not always comfortable sharing that. So I'm like, give me the aggregate. I just need to know per quarter compared to lifetime value of the customer where we are. And then I really advocated for using that comparison to figure out if marketing is spending effectively and efficiently, as opposed to trying to do it by channel and staggering when things are happening. And like, we have to do a little bit of math. If our average customer life cycle is 6 months, we're probably looking at cost 2 quarters back to earnings this quarter. That's okay.
Yeah.
But don't get obsessed with, okay, well, how much did you spend on advertising and how many dollars came out of that? Because that's an exercise in futility.
That I would say that's probably very, very common still. We're still talking about CAC. We're still talking about CPLs, cost per leads, advertising budgets.
Yeah, I understand CPL. That's absolutely worth doing. CAC, yes, please lean into that. Now, looking at advertising channel spend, and for every dollar in, how many dollars do we get out? That's insane. Because in marketing, like, we need to be tracking what's efficient and what's leading to the right leads.
Yeah.
Because we can have a campaign that looks wildly efficient. We're getting a ton of leads, a ton of click-throughs.
Yeah.
But it's the wrong data set. And our sales team is like, we can't do anything with this. And it was a complete waste of time. So looking at a higher level, and then that individual contributor should be looking at their output and optimizing for the output, and not just those leading indicator metrics like cost per lead.
And also back to your earlier point about layering in insights too, right? Qualitative insights. So you
absolutely
have more of a holistic look at the leads that are coming in through these channels.
Yeah, and I am a huge advocate of lost opportunity interviews and customer interviews. And I don't think enough companies do that, where you ideally have a neutral party who's not going to lead the witness and will get really honest feedback about, on a lost opportunity, what did you think you were getting into before you talked to the salesperson? How is that different from what the salesperson said? It's like really critical. I just don't see it enough. And it's such a great tool.
Yeah, exactly. And who would you suggest that neutral party be? Is that someone internal or like an external party?
It can be. If you have an operations person who is good at speaking with folks, some of them tend to be really introverted and it's not going to work. But if you have an operations person Or even early stage, somebody who's more like financial oriented, who's removed from the go-to-market teams and messaging that we have out there.
Oh,
They
interesting.
they won't know enough to lead the witness, and they'll learn a lot of really valuable things.
Yeah, yeah. And how would you think some of these valuable insights could help sales and marketing? What are some things that we can do with that information?
Oh my gosh. There's so much. There's so much. And I wish customer success would talk to marketing more, because we can learn so much from them too. But let's start like new acquisition.
Yeah.
Um, Customer opportunity interviews can tell you, is the messaging that marketing's using the messaging that sales uses? Is the
Hmm.
value marketing's promoting the value that sales use? I mean, there's so much opportunity for misalignment there, especially in early stage companies,
Yeah.
because the sales team is constantly adapting compared to the feedback they received. Whereas
Hmm.
marketing, we can get stuck in this silo. We're really busy. We're trying to support everybody. It's not malicious, but it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
So that is a really great way to uncover misalignment, and then how your message is landing versus not landing.
Yeah.
And then really digging into, okay, what exactly are they trying to solve? Because I can't tell you how many times we've found out that what we think our product does is not what they're purchasing it for.
As in their understanding of it as a result of the way we message to them.
Just the problem they're trying to solve. So for example, attribution, we thought
Hmm.
they were trying to get like a 1-for-1 each interaction math. No, they were trying to use this in the boardroom for departmental contribution. Oh, that's a completely different setup and
Yes,
product, you
yes,
know?
yes. So this even precedes marketing and sales activities. It's maybe doing some customer research into your use cases for the product.
Absolutely. Well, and it's validating
Yeah,
over and over again. It's not
yeah,
something you should do once.
yeah,
The market has changed significantly. Why aren't
yeah,
we adapting?
yeah, yeah. I certainly agree with staying close to the customer from the out from the get-go. And it's really hard to build marketing strategies, sales strategies without having done that customer research. So again, back to the earlier points that have been made, it's not just about your quantitative data, it's also qualitative. Do you know your markets well enough? Right? Are you carving out the right use cases for the right buyer personas? Paired with the
Yep.
right messages to, so that you avoid this knowledge gap, this misunderstanding about what they think they're buying the product for, as opposed to what this product is designed to do.
And I think something a lot of people miss with data is it's always going to be more about how people feel than what the numbers say. So getting sales to participate in the process of deciding what attribution looks like and which touch points are important, bringing them along, including them in these ICP
Yeah.
rediscovery conversations, and the feedback we're getting is so critical. I don't think in revenue operations, I was so data driven and assumed that what made sense to me made sense to everybody else. And that's just
Mm,
not the case because of what they're experiencing on an ongoing basis. So empathy plays into this, and
yeah.
figuring out what makes people tick and then bringing them along in the process is hypercritical to get people to believe the numbers that you're using.
Yeah. Yeah. So important, because we can be so blindsided by our own world.
Yep.
And because we look at this all the time, we think, oh, this must be basic. Everyone could get it. But no, they're not in your context.
Yeah. Embrace being uncomfortable too. If somebody says, I don't agree with that, dig into it. You might learn something.
Yeah. Yeah. Break down the walls. Bring those hard
Yeah.
conversations to the table. Great. I want to switch gear a little. We know that data is important. I also want to talk about enablement. This is something that has come up quite a bit with founders, with early stage teams, especially. Right, many still rely on spreadsheets and basic tools
Yep.
to set the data, to manage that data. So I'm curious to hear from you. Is this like, at what point should we consider upgrading to more advanced tools, or will spreadsheets be effective life for us?
It's an interesting question because I see so often the bigger gap is with the talent we're investing in.
Oh, interesting. Hmm.
So data is great if it's structured correctly and we have a resource who is really adept at pattern matching and researching. If we don't have the person who can adeptly translate things, come up with hypotheses, and really
Mhm.
help the business, the data isn't useful.
Mm.
So I think it's super critical early on to invest in your infrastructure and how your systems are set up. Bring in a professional, vet the professional. Not all of them are tuned into like how marketing automation should flow into the CRM. If you're working with somebody who specializes in marketing automation, really drill them on, okay, well, how is this going to transfer to the CRM and how should we report on it
Mm.
in there? If they're hyper focused on marketing automation, you're not going to get the right data to the sales team.
Mm.
So knowing these nuances or sourcing someone who can ask the right questions, who has the experience, is super critical.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a fractional person or hired internally, it's super, super important to figure out, okay, so who's going to translate this into next steps?
Yeah.
And do we have the information we need to get that?
Right. And it sounds like to
Invest early.
Yeah.
Invest early in infrastructure and system setup. Analytics, you can get a ton out of the systems you use
Mm-hmm.
if you have the right resource, setting things up in a clean way
Mm.
that's easy to analyze on the other side. And not all systems are created equally. HubSpot's really difficult to report on in terms, the campaign data structure is kind of squidgy.
Yes.
But it's there. The digital piece is super strong. So working with people who know that little mine is out there and how to avoid it is super
Yeah.
critical.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what I'm hearing is get your systems and processes set up early.
Yes.
Get someone who has a broader view than just marketing automation,
Yes.
marketing
Yes.
data, right? Pipeline, sales and marketing, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
And they're hard to find, and expect that. So really drill people. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
paying them a lot of money. Ask all
Yeah.
the questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And spreadsheets still effective live then, regardless of what fancy CRM or marketing automation platform you might be working off of?
As a company matures, ideally you have a data lake or a data warehouse or some kind of analytics solution. However, a CRM admin is always going to be in spreadsheets. It is a fact of life. I think you should be able to get most of the reports in your CRM.
Yeah.
If you can't, there's a problem with how you set things up.
Mm.
So if you're having to export and manipulate everything, you need to relook at your systems.
Mm. That's a good indicator.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to just like break open your CRM and see how things are set up.
I did write a guide that we can share on that.
Oh, amazing. Yes,
Yeah.
great.
Salesforce Admin's Guide to Campaign Setup.
Amazing. I will certainly be sure to add that to the show notes after this.
Perfect.
So yeah. We do have a few minutes left, and I think this is certainly a great look into data, how dirty it can get, and how we need to be very, proactive with it, not, control it and not let it control us.
Mhm.
That said, I'm going to turn it over to rapid fire questions just to wrap things up. These are questions that I've designed to just help us to get to know you on a more personal level.
Oh,
You
fun.
ready?
Yeah.
So we'll start with the first one. What's your favorite guilty pleasure apart from data?
Oh my God, trash TV.
Oh, what is an example of trash TV that you're watching right now?
Sister Wives and the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is super fascinating.
The last time I watched something like that was Big Love. How many years ago was that?
Yeah, that was an HBO thing. Yeah, trashy reality TV. Yeah, that's my
Amazing.
guilty pleasure.
What are you reading right now that you recommend?
So it's Cured. I'm going to space on the author. It's a medical doctor, and they are researching cases of spontaneous remission from things like autoimmune disease and cancer and like all of the factors. Like there's no silver bullet, just like in business, but it's super fascinating.
What's the name of the book?
Cured.
Cured. Okay.
Mhm.
If you weren't doing this job, what's the most unusual job you'd be doing right now?
Oh, probably like a forensics analyst. I would love to get into computer data, but I would not like there's some cases that would just be too much. I don't know how people deal with like abuse and stuff. So
Yeah, that
I'd
sounds
have to find a way to be selective, like missing persons, and that would be super interesting.
yeah. Cool. What's the weirdest or funniest habit you might have that might surprise people?
I talk to my dogs a lot in funny voices. So I had an electrician over the other day and burst in and was talking to my dog, didn't realize they were there. And I'm like, I should be embarrassed, but it's just what it is.
And your dog respond to different voices?
Yep. Yep. They know which voice is theirs.
That's so adorable. And finally, what's one fashion trend that you're glad has come back or hope never does?
It did come back, but it's gone away again. The mullet. I don't understand. I thought we were done with that, and then it came back. I'm like, why?
Fashion recycles itself. So
it really does. It really does.
Well, finally, what's the best way for our listeners to follow your work or get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me. If you're into operations or you're an operations professional, the RevOps Co-op, very active there. So either of those works really well.
And how do we get into the RevOps Co-op?
RevOpsCoop.com is the way to go, and it's a Slack community of over 13,000 operations professionals, and they are so active and helpful. It's really a great place for people who are trying to figure out how to fix data and make sense of it.
Nice. I will be sure to get that from you as well.
Wonderful.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show, Camela. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We've certainly learned a lot. And for the rest of you, if you have found this super helpful, I'd love for you to follow us. We are going to constantly be putting out programs like this with more episodes like this. And you know where to find Camela if you have more questions. I'll be following up with more materials for you. So keep your eye on the channel on YouTube and our LinkedIn account.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.